I'm just going to hand over presentation to Sandra. And here you go. You should be able to start now.
Okay, good morning everyone. I'm Sandra Sankey. I'm a project manager working for the Improvement Service on the Improving Outcomes and Money Advice project. Thank you for participating in the webinar today. Some of you participating today will already, be familiar with the work that we do, and some of you may be coming to this for the first time. So just to let you know that this webinar today has been coordinated specifically for local authority lead commissioners of advice services only. So there isn't anyone out with local authorities that's participating in the webinar, and that's purposely coordinated that way to create a space for attendees to ask questions openly, and also for the presenter and myself to openly discuss things in confidence. So I would ask everybody today to respect that. We do have, it's a small group, we have about 14 of us on the webinar today, and that covers around 7 local authority areas. So quite similar to the first webinar session that we delivered on the 9th of March, similar numbers, and again spanning across a similar geographic spread as well. So that one went quite well. Hopefully this one will today.
Can I just say, Sandra, that everybody's on mute here. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions for Sandra and Sheila, please use the questions box that is in your control panel at the bottom, and I will pass them on to Sheila and Sandra at the end when we get to the Q&A session. I forgot to say that, so sorry about interrupting. Back to you.
That's okay. Thanks very much, Christopher. So the Money Advice Outcomes project that we've mentioned already, this slide's really for the purpose of people that are coming to this for the first time, and it just gives a snapshot of a couple of areas of our key work streams, priority areas for us on the project. So the project is a partnership agreement between the UK Money Advice Service and the Improvement Service, with the Money Advice Service being the major funder. I've been involved with this project for a number of years now, and for those of you that are familiar with the framework for public funding of advice already, you'll know that that stems from our initial research at the Improvement Service, as well as the Scottish Legal Aid Board research, which had highlighted that there needed to be, more better, improved coordination between strategic funders of advice services, and improve on the performance management. So this slide will go onto our website afterwards with the presentations. You will be able to click on the hyperlinks, but will take you into our project web pages if you're not familiar with anything, and there'll be opportunities to come back and engage with us in the project afterwards. There's a whole range of things that we're involved with in the project, and events and various publications as well, that are all the materials will be accessible on our web pages. So please keep in touch on that. So just to kind of outline what we're going to cover in the webinar today, I'm going to give a bit of feedback from some of the stakeholder engagement that we've already had, and that will include, a recent survey. Well, it's not so recent, it's was last year. This initial survey went out to the local authority leads to find out about the commissioning approaches, and we're going to hear later from Sheila in Highland. Mentioned earlier that we heard on the 9th of March from North Lanarkshire Council. John Campbell, who is the Financial Inclusion Manager, shared their new commissioning model for advice services, again taking effect from April this year. Case study regarding the North Lanarkshire approach is available on our web pages now, and similar for Highland, one will be made available after the webinar today. So the reason we needed to carry out this survey is that we needed to find out a bit more about what was happening across the local authorities. the feedback had suggested that we needed to know a bit more what was going on, evidence where people were able to apply the framework in some instances, and where perhaps others were maybe struggling. We wanted to understand, what the governance decision-making process looked like in local authorities, because some of the feedback, that we were getting through our networks was that things were still a bit disjointed, decisions being made, not reflecting what was happening on the ground, no communications. But this piece of work has hopefully helped us to gather a bit more insight into what those relationships look like at a local level between the services delivering and those responsible for making the decisions around funding, and as well as at a national level. And at the same time, explore what opportunities there are to collaborate around some of our findings, and understand more about the challenges, both at a local level and a national level, and how we can work together to try to overcome some of these challenges, learn how others have been able to overcome some of the challenges as well, and how we can share that with others wider, so that it will help other people as they're trying to implement some change going forward. So what the initial survey findings have shown us so far is that the governance arrangements have changed quite radically over the years, and still will continue to change, as there's a lot of service restructuring going on between directorates and local authorities. The governance arrangements in various committees do span over about 18 different executive committees in local authorities. Looking at the funding models so far, the findings are showing that for this year going forward, that it's still the majority being funded through grant funding agreements with service level agreements. However, there has been a few that have moved to a new contract and tender agreement from April this year. Quite significantly, actually, quite a few that have moved to longer term funding models from April this year, spanning between 2 to 4 years, which is a positive shift. However, have noticed that there's about 6 local authorities that have shared that they have got savings proposals to make in 18-19 going forward, and one has indicated for the 19-20 future savings as well. In terms of advice service reviews, which again can be quite ranging, some that have started, some that are still to continue, and we need to find out a bit more of what exactly those reviews might entail, what they'll look like. There's quite a significant number of advice service reviews going ahead into 18-19, looking at about 13 identified so far, a couple of which will look at a whole council review, incorporating wider advice other than money and benefits advice. And internal advice services as well. I've noticed about 5 that are looking to still go through a restructuring process. So quite a bit of change going on. Looking as well, there's about 3 local authorities that have got a contract and tender agreement at the moment, but will also be looking to renew and put out new tenders later on in 2018, around about July, October and December time. I'll just skim over this slide, but I've just highlighted to you so that you can see at a snapshot the range of things that people reported that were the influencing factors for impacting on future funding of advice service and delivery. And you'll see here from the monitoring reporting as well that it's quite varied. People have reported different monitoring arrangements in terms of frequency, and also who does that and what that looks like, whether it's face-to-face or submitting reports. just another snapshot slide just to show you all the kind of key strategic priorities and how the advice services are aligned to these strategic outcomes and strategies. So for applying the framework, this survey and the future engagement, one thing I did forget to mention in my earlier slide was that a stakeholder workshop was held at the later part of last year. I think we had about 50% representation of the local authorities at that stakeholder session, and we had a range of presentations, but we also had some facilitated group discussion around some of the challenges in terms of monitoring the quality of advice, looking at the performance management in more detail, looking at approaches for joint commissioning arrangements within a kind of strategic partnership framework, and also looking at service delivery improvements and looking at a needs assessment and planning, and trying to get a feel for what the challenges were for individuals for doing that. So the survey was a follow-on as well, trying to identify, to help us in the project understand a bit more where some local authorities have tried to apply key elements of the framework, just to see what progress is being made, what are the challenges, and what sort of support do people need around this. This is why we're here today with this webinar. That was one of the recommendations and feedback that we received from our stakeholder engagement, is that webinars would be a useful method to engage and for people to learn and share their knowledge and practice. In terms of next steps, I think I mentioned that we will publish some publications onto our web pages following the good practice that's been shared, some case studies. There'll also be a report that will be produced with the findings from the survey, and that will highlight the lead people in each local authority area and the commissioning approaches for advice services. Hopefully that will be a useful document for people to refer to and for future engagement. We'll also want to engage with you further, look at any additional support, what people will need for moving forward, look at what we can do in terms of preparing any guidance to help people to apply the framework, looking at preparing any checklists, any future events, and also any future progress reports that need to go to any particular key stakeholders. So please do continue to engage with us. I hope you have found that helpful so far, and I'm going to hand you over to Sheila McAndy now, who will take us through the experience in Highland and the new model coming in from April. Over to you, Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Sheila, I'll just give you control of the slides. So.
Okay.
Hello,
everybody.
Hello, Sheila.
Can everybody see the slides okay?
We can see the slides here, so it should be okay at the other end. Everybody else is muted, so they won't be able to answer you.
All right, okay. Okay, so I would just like to start by saying there may not be anything new in the slides today, but I do hope you find them useful, and if nothing else, they may hopefully provide some reassurance in terms of your future direction and any reviews that you're about to undertake. I'm also hoping to glean some lessons from yourselves in terms of what you've learned from your processes, and there may be things that we could be doing better in Highland. So I'm hoping this is a two-way exchange of information. One last thing I would like to say is I'm just coming out of a very heavy cold, so I may start coughing at some point throughout the presentation. I do apologise in advance if that's distracting for people. So what I'd like to cover today is just a wee bit about the Highlands, the background to how we came to the review, setting out what we have researched and what we've established as the legal duty in terms of what we have to deliver as a council, our service delivery arrangements, how we actually approached the review, the findings of the review, and the recommendations that came out of the review. So just talking about the Highlands, and we think this is important just to set in context the challenges that we have in Highland, because they will be very different to the challenges that some other authorities have. So we're a very largely dispersed local authority, and we've got the 7th highest population of the 32 authorities in Scotland, but our land area is 33% of Scotland. So whilst we don't have high population numbers, the land mass is immense. And you can see there, we're nearly the size of Belgium, we're 20% larger than Wales, and as we all know, Wales has got more than one local authority. So we approached the review within that context, that it was really important for us that every citizen who accessed advice received a quality and a consistent service, regardless of where they were situated in Highland. So the background to the review, that came around at a meeting of the council, full council meeting on the 9th of March 17, when elected members agreed to undertake a wide range review of debt advice and related services. The Director of Finance reported the outcomes of the review, including all our recommendations, to our People Committee in October 2017. So on those timescales are quite important for you to take note of, because it looks like quite a small, tight window in amongst everything else that you're doing, because we had nobody dedicated fully to doing this. We were just doing this in amongst everything else that we were trying to achieve in that time, including universal credit. But we planned it, we looked forward, we worked backwards. So what meeting were we trying to report to in terms of having member approval? And we worked backwards from that in terms of our timetabling. So that's one thing I would stress to everybody in terms of our success. That was key to our success, was the look forward and then timetabling it backwards, so we could hit the relevant dates. And why October was relevant to us was, should members ask for a further report following October, or should members not agree with officers' recommendations and we had more work to do, it was giving us 2 or 3 more meetings to return to members to try and get approval, because the existing contracts expired on the 31st of March 18 and we couldn't extend them. So we absolutely had to have something in place from the 1st of April 18. So within the context of the review that we were doing for advice services, the council is undergoing, and you'll be undergoing exactly the same, a redesign process. We call it redesign, no doubt you call it something else. So that's just looking at all the opportunities in the council to make efficiencies, to generate income, to do things differently, to take contracts back in, to put contracts out. The whole mix is on the table. So we were trying to do this review within the context of the other redesigns that were happening around us, including service restructurings. So we reduced the number of directors, and we combined a number of what we call services, you may call departments. We combined a number of services together. So there was a lot going on and a lot happening, and we had to take note of all of that as part of our review. We also looked external to the council, and we're very aware of welfare reform. Obviously, that was coming down the tracks at us. There was universal credit happening in Highland, and there were other influencing factors in terms of zero-hour contracts, seasonal employment. We're faced with quite a lot of seasonal employment in Highland, and there's quite long spells when people are unemployed because there's just not sufficient employment for them where they live. So the first thing we set about trying to understand is, well, what is it that we absolutely have to provide? Because at the moment, what we procure is we procure debt advice, welfare advice, housing advice, and employment advice. So that's what we procure under the current contract, which is it was a 3-year contract plus the opportunity to roll forward for 2 years, which we did. So it's been a 5-year contract. And at the moment, those are the 4 elements that we're currently procuring. So we set about trying to establish, well, do we have to procure all of those advice types? And are there other advice types that we should be procuring that we're not? That was quite a lengthy exercise, but it involved liaising with colleagues in social work and housing, involved talking to the housing regulator just to understand where the boundaries are in terms of housing support services and advice services. That was a very useful discussion. And the conclusions that we came to are set out on this slide. So the conclusions we came to are that we absolutely must provide some debt advice, some welfare advice, and some housing advice. And there was no obligation on the council to provide employment rights advice. Now, within that, in establishing our statutory requirement, we then went about trying to establish, well, to what level have we got to provide these advice types? And it's quite interesting because the legislation is quite loose, particularly around debt and welfare. So although it sets out in the Social Work Act that we do need to provide advice, it just says at a level that's appropriate for your local authority area. Now, different people will interpret that different ways. So we weren't actually able to establish that because we've got a population of X, we had to provide Y advice for those two debt advice types. The Housing Scotland Act goes into a bit more detail, as I'm sure many of you will know, in terms of the types of advice that must be provided. So in terms of our existing service delivery arrangements in Highland, we've got the CABs, we've got 8 CABs providing those 4 advice types that I've just discussed. In addition to that, within the council, there's quite a mix of advice being delivered. So there's the welfare support team, which I manage, which provide income maximisation services, personal budgeting support, and the assisted digital support services through a universal credit. Our community services, the housing arm of community services, are providing housing advice. We've got our employability team, who are also providing advice in terms of gaining access to the labour market. And in terms of corporate governance, we've got our own HR people who provide employment rights advice to our own employees. So very quickly we came to the conclusion there's a real mix there. So looking out with that combination, we then, well, what else is being provided in Highland and by whom? And the list went on and on and on, as I'm sure that you experience in your own areas as well. And I've just listed there some of the providers of advice in Highland. So there is a good concentration of advice in Highland. I think what's lacking is an understanding by customers as to where they can get advice and what kind of advice they can receive. So this slide here just covers our current arrangements up until March, the end of March this year. So our current contracts, there's 8 of them with CAB, and they're worth around 1.2 million. So over the 5-year period, that comes to about £6 million. So it's a significant sum. So therefore, the review had to be robust and significant. And the key thing for us about the review was it was evidence-based. It wasn't subjective in any way, it was evidence-based. And if any of you have got the opportunity and time to read the report, which we did present to members, I think it will come through for you very quickly that it is evidence-based. The 4 types of advice types, which I've already discussed with you. But in addition to that, we also provided additional project funding to CAB to provide a mental health project for people experiencing mental ill health and a midwifery project. So on top of the 1.2 million, they were receiving other funding from the council, which the way we managed that was I continued to manage the additional project funding monies through the contract, and we did contract variations for those. Performance reporting in the current service delivery contract was significant. And the reality of it was that not all CABs submitted their performance information in full. They all did submit performance information, but not all did it in full. I don't think, in fact, any of them actually adhered to the performance monitoring information that was in the contract. But we didn't actually do very much with the performance information. There was key performance information we were taking out of their returns and using that to monitor the contract and to have discussions with the contractors and also to report to elected members. But the bulk of the information that we were expecting and requiring through the contract was unnecessary. So in terms of governance, we carried out 8 annual contract review meetings across the whole of the Highlands. So that was 8 days out of the office. We carried out, members of my team carried out quality advice audits. So that was another 8 times that we were out of the office, 8 days out of the office. We did quarterly monitoring reports to elected members. We do an annual report to elected members. And we also meet with the CAB managers on a quarterly basis, a group meeting on a quarterly basis. So the governance that we had wrapped around this contract was significant in terms of the time. And that was something we were keen to review as part of the review from April 18. So just to give you just a feel for what else happens in Highland, in addition to the CABs delivering these advice types, I mentioned, I mentioned that I manage a welfare support team, and they cost the council around 450k per annum. That team is located across the Highlands, so that each administrative area that we have, we've got 8 administrative areas in Highland. Each location has got one welfare officer, at least one welfare officer located within it. And we monitor the welfare support team quite similar to the way we monitor the CABs in terms of the number of contacts, the welfare gains. We also monitor personal budgeting and advice. We, for our own team, we do quality checking on our cases. So we do management checks every month, and we report progress of the team to members, and we also include the progress of the team and performance of the in-house team in the annual report to members as well. So, our review process. Once we got the decision in March that there was going to be a review of advice services, we thought, right, how will we set about doing this? And there were different ways we could have done it, and it was very much horses for courses. We were also very aware of the timescales that we had. But what we wanted, as I keep referring to, we wanted to gather evidence because we wanted decisions to be based on evidence and no other factors. So we set about a consultation process, and we were very keen not to call it consultation, although that's what I've called it on the slide, because what we didn't want people to think was that they were coming along to a session and we were giving them time, but we weren't really listening to them. So we were really keen to ensure that we listened to people and gave them feedback, and that they had the opportunity at any time to come and talk to us. So these are the individuals who we communicated with. So we're very keen to have a workshop with CAB, and that was really productive. All parties came to that with openness. We had frank and honest discussions, and there was things they said they didn't like about the current contract, and there was things they said they wanted retained from the current contract into the new contract, and we took all of that on board. Community partnerships, you'll have exactly the same partnership groups as what I'm referring to here. So that's when all the different public agencies come together. We call them community partnerships. We attended the community partnerships. It was quite a lot of time commitment, but it was very worth it, because what we got from that was the local dimension. Because what works in Inverness City will not work in a rural location in Caithness, for example. So that was really powerful in terms of giving communities the opportunity to feed into us and to make suggestions to us. We also have in the Council a welfare reform working group, which comprises of the group leaders of each of the political parties and senior officers. And we regularly report into the welfare reform working group on various aspects. And we also took a review process step by step to that working group. And they gave us pointers in terms of where they thought what direction we should be taking. They listened, they gave us positive feedback and encouraged us and supported us throughout the process. We also did a lot of engagement with our own internal services to a level which we've probably never done it before, in terms of making sure at each checkpoint, were they happy with the direction? Were they happy with our interpretation? Were there any new ideas, initiatives in their area of control that would be influencing this contract going forward? We also did a lot of external stakeholder engagement. And you'll also have an annual citizens panel survey. I don't know what you call it. We call it the Performance and Attitudes Report. And we included questions within that survey to get feedback from citizens about advice and information services. Another key thing that we did for this review, and it was very, very helpful, was we commissioned the University of the Highlands and Islands to undertake a literature review for us. Now, we could have done some of that work ourselves, but we thought it was really important to have that independent look at advice services. And we've included in our report, which hopefully some of you will look at, the key recommendations and observations that came out of that literature review. And that wasn't just a look at Highland, that was a look across Scotland and even into England and Wales. Because what UHI told us was, in terms of governance and performance reporting and access to services, what is happening elsewhere in the UK is what is happening in Highland. So they felt it was quite relevant to the review in Highland. Before we did our public report to elected members, we took our report, our draft report, in terms of our findings and recommendations to our executive leadership team. Now, our executive leadership team is made up of all of our directors and the chief executive. You'll have the same, you just probably don't call it that. Once we got feedback from them, we then took it to the Welfare Reform Working Group, which I've referred to earlier is the group leaders from each of the political parties and senior officers. Then we did our published report to the People Committee that was approved in full actually in October. So in terms of the review process, we felt it was really important to have that future look, and I would recommend that to all of you. Be very aware of what's happening currently, what's happening in the short term, but also look as far forward as you can in terms of the long-term look. And these were the things that we came up with, the key things that we came up with in terms of what could influence this contract going forward. The socio-economic duty, the one I've got listed there, that was a big one for us. So we had to understand, well, what is that duty? And we were maybe moving forward at a quicker pace in terms of our advice review than the information was coming out about the socio-economic duty. So you just have to make good of the information that's available to you. There was also the Scottish Government's independent review of debt advice funding, and we were really keen to tap into their knowledge and understanding, but again, we were ahead of them in terms of timetable. So we have shared the outcome of our review with the Scottish Government, so they can take learning from that. Disability Confident, our own council was signing up to Disability Confident and had spoken to key managers to say that wherever possible, when you're commissioning and doing contracts, that we would like wherever possible for our contractors to be disability confident. So that was a key one for the council. It may not be key for yourselves, but I've added it in the slide just to prompt you for something for you to think about. In terms of the University of the Highlands and Islands Literature Review, this is the brief that we gave to them that's set out on the slide there. So we wanted them to look at the quality of evidence. How do you demonstrate need for these services? Because that was key to us. I mean, all local authorities are having to rethink their budgets and having to look really hard at the financial decisions that they're making. So it was very important for us to be able to demonstrate need for these services. Access as well. Again, going back to the size and the geography of Highland, it was really important for us that people had access, equal access to these services, and that they got consistent and quality advice, regardless of where they lived in Highland. We were also keen to look at the standards and measuring performance, because as I said, under the current contract that we have with CAB, the performance monitoring goes on for pages, and I'm not sure we did an awful lot with that. So we were hoping to learn from the literature review on these 4 key elements. So we got quite a lot of findings, and I won't go through them all here, but you can read them at your leisure. But one of the key things, and you'll have heard this time and time again, is ensuring the customer's at the heart of service design, and that was really key for us. Because our communities are quite different, and that's where our engagement with the community partnerships came in really quite helpfully, because as I said, what works in Inverness City won't work in one of our rural locations. Another key finding that came out of our review was that it's important for advice and information services to be aware of the other services that are operating around them, and for the other services to be aware of the advice and information services that are at the heart of delivering these services in Highland. We're really keen going forward to get better linkages and better referral systems working across all the agencies and all the services, that we're all trying to achieve the same aim about supporting people and improving their quality of life and helping them move forward in whatever way they need to move forward. And that's a key thing that's come out of this, is just making those links a bit better, strengthening the referral processes. We were also very conscious of welfare reform and what is the changing need in terms of advice services. In terms of monitoring, we do a report to our elected members every August to monitor performance. And one of the things that came out of last year's performance monitoring report is that debt advice, we're actually seeing a decline in the demand for debt advice. So it's actually declined by 20%, whereas benefits advice, it was actually increasing. So demand for benefit advice was increasing by about 16%. So there's still a huge need for debt advice in Highland, but it's just getting that balance and that split right between what's the changing needs of the communities and the external environment in which we're operating. So I've put in there some of the key highlights from the UHI review, and that's about reaching out to other services I have on that slide there. So we were very pleased, very relieved that our elected members approved all of our recommendations that were in our report, and there was quite a list of recommendations in the report. They did decide on the day to introduce the saving of 130,000 over 2 years rather than in year one. So that was also very useful, and the CABs welcomed that. So the result of our review was that we would move from 8 contracts into one single contract for the whole of Highland. And Inverness, Badenoch and Traspey CAB have been awarded that contract. It was a direct award for that contract. The full report, we've included the link there for the full report, and even if you just read the recommendations, it might just give you some pointers in terms of any work that you have to do in terms of looking at a review of these services. So the recommendations have resulted in a new delivery model for Highland, and we do believe that it will be achievable with a single contract. What Inverness, Badenoch and Traspey CAB are going to do is subcontract elements of the contract out to the other CABs in Highland. And I have to say, the CABs have been absolutely fantastic. They've completely bought into the new delivery arrangement. They actually suggested ways of achieving that. We've worked with them throughout. It's just been tremendous what we've achieved as a group for Highland, and we all believe that this will be better in the long run. In terms of performance standards, it was really interesting, and I don't think any of us would have predicted this at the outset. It's really interesting what we came up with in terms of performance standards. And again, our performance standards that we've agreed with CAB are included in the report on the link that I've just shared with you there. So on the very back page, we've gone from multiple pages of performance monitoring information to a single page, because we recognised and CAB recognised that all we need to gather is meaningful performance information. We don't need pages and pages of information that nobody ever looks at or nobody can actually provide to us. And that was a joint agreement that we came to in terms of what are the key things that will help us measure and demonstrate the need for advice services going forward. In coming to the agreement with CAB regarding the new performance measures going forward from April, we were very keen to understand, well, if we're contracting with CAB, what governance arrangements do they already have? And this slide sets out the arrangements they already have. So they're subject to CAS audits, and they've got a new system in for that. They're all signing up for the national standards. We agreed with them that we would reserve the right to audit, but that we would move to a risk-based audit approach, which means that we would only audit if there were concerns flagged about our contractor. Because bear in mind, we'll be dealing with one contractor going forward. We won't be dealing with 8. And that was a fantastic meeting of minds and really good joint working. And I'd recommend that to you all if you've got very heavy governance going on in your contracts at the moment. I would look at that area, because it certainly will free up time for us to concentrate on other things from April. Financial education in schools was a real key one for us. So we were really keen to say to our colleagues in the council across various services, okay, the council is going to be investing about 1.1 million per year in contracting services. How can that better support some of the statutory things that the council has to do, not within advice and information, but within other services? And our education colleagues were saying, well, perhaps you could support the curriculum for excellence in terms of financial education, because we're really quite keen in Highland to try and introduce a more preventative approach. So not react once people are in debt, but try and prevent them from getting into debt in the first place. And this is just one of the strands that we're looking at. We haven't quite bottomed out how we're going to achieve that yet, but the CAB are very supportive of this, and some of them were already doing some financial education in schools. So there's lots of lessons that we can learn from their experiences to date. As part of the advice and information review, we did look at our housing support services contract that's worth about 1.6 million per annum to see whether or not that should be delivered as part of advice and information, or should elements of it be delivered as part of advice and information. The conclusion we came to through discussion with the housing regulator was that no, it sat alongside and was separate to, but wasn't part of advice and information services. So as part of our recommendations to elected members in October 17, we have recommended that lessons learned from the Advice and Information Services Review will be fed into the Housing Support Services Review. And we're having ongoing discussions with our housing colleagues regarding that. Another thing that we're really keen to do going forward is to increase the awareness of advice and information services, because it can be quite a confusing picture for people. So we want to be a bit clearer about where people can go for what type of advice and how they can access that advice. And that's me, you'll be pleased to hear. I hope that was helpful for everybody.
Thank you very much, Sheila. So we're going on to the question and answer session now with both Sandra and Sheila available for questions. A question that I've had, are you willing to share the slides, both of you, with the audience?
Yes, well, I certainly am.
Okay, yep, absolutely. There'll be a case study, we'll go onto our website as well.
Thank you very much, Sandra. You can, yeah, when you need to hear Sheila, you can use that mute there. Thank you. So we'll start off. We only have a single question so far, but it's a simple one for both of you. How do we factor in continuous improvement and innovation at a time when there are so many unknowns, Brexit, etc.? So if you could answer that, I'm sure you will run for Parliament next time as well.
Do you want me to have a go at that, Sandra?
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
Sheila?
Okay. Well, what we've done in Highland, and I'm sure many of you have already done this, we've looked at our processes and we've broken them down into chunk sizes, and we've thought, oh, why is that adding value? And we've really challenged ourselves. Why are we doing that? Do we need to do that? Is it something we've always just done and it's just been adopted year on year? And we have removed many steps out of our processes. And that's how we intend to keep reviewing, keep challenging, asking us really difficult questions, not being precious about the process, not being precious about the way we do things, and also I think talking with one another. So I referred to earlier, we have these quarterly group meetings with each of the CAB managers. They're all in the room at the same time and they meet with ourselves. We discuss that quite a bit at these meetings in terms of, well, this is how it is from the inside the council, this is what we're thinking of, what do you think? And we get some really good feedback from them. So I would say also talk to stakeholders who can be critical friends, and you can have that confidential conversation with them and nobody's precious about it.
Sandra, do you have an answer?
Thank you, Sheila. No, I think that's really important points to make. Just to really say that if anyone wants to, discuss that in more detail, to certainly, have a chat with me afterwards, and we can look at what else we can do, to maybe help give a bit of support around that too.
Yep, we have another question here. We're just about to start our advice review. Our council wants it to be wide-ranging, covering consumer advice, immigration advice, employment rights, etc. Any thoughts on that? Sheila?
Well, personally, the way we approached the employment rights was we demonstrated that there wasn't a legal duty to provide that. And we also set out in our paper that ACAS are the professionals in terms of employment advice, and it's free at point of use. And our members accepted that, and our CAB partners accepted that as well. So we didn't come across a stumbling point in terms of that. We just spoke it through, we provided the evidence, and then we made our recommendation that we stop doing employment rights advice.
Okay, Sandra, do you have...
Sorry, I was just going to say the same on
I think
there's not a duty.
Sorry,
Sandra.
Have you finished, Sheila?
I was just going to say there's not a duty on the council to provide immigration advice, and there are others who can provide that advice, probably to a very good standard and a higher standard perhaps than what we could provide ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Sandra, do you have any experience to share?
Just to say that obviously, looking at what the legal duty and pointing that out is important. I think looking at the approach that has already been carried out and responses, from members in other area and things that, have worked well is always going to be useful learning, to share with your own members and stakeholders at a local level. And obviously if there's then challenges around that, I think it's important that we still learn from that and engage, and also look at, what else, we can do to, help facilitate some of that, maybe provide that critical friend challenge. So I think this is where it's really important that we all share that and engage with each other and look at, what the challenges are, because if it's, what works well in one area, we know it, and it might not necessarily work so well in another. And I think we just need to try to understand that across the piece. And then when it comes to looking at how we collectively, do our reports to maybe some national stakeholders and members, that we can try to reflect that. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We don't have any more questions from the audience, so if any of the attendees have any more questions, this is the time to start typing them, because otherwise we'll end the webinar soon. Sandra, do you have any questions for Sheila? I saw you taking notes. So.
Be kind.
I think, okay, let me reflect on my own notes. Sheila, you did, I was interested certainly, when you'd said about the customer being at the heart of everything, and you made a key point right at the start about steps taken to improve customers' one thing that came out of your review was looking at the steps to improve customers' understanding of what advice is out there, where people, can go for advice. So I guess, is there anything, obviously later on in your presentation, you spoke more about how you went about that, but if there's anything more that you could share, or the plans, to maybe address that and look at, or how you'll monitor that as well, that's making a difference. I'd be interested, in how that will really, you think, the steps that have been taken and how that will ultimately improve access to ongoing advice.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Sandra. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to review our website. We do already have the contact details for each of the CAB on our website, but it's not very clear, well, what do we mean by debt advice? What do we mean by welfare advice? Those are terms that we all understand, but not necessarily the customer understands. So we're going to have a look at the language that we use. We're going to do the website. We're also going to be clearer on literature that we put out, that the advice is available, and promote the CAB more than we have been doing. We do include them on some key documents. For example, our council tax bill, for example, promotes CAB. I think it's 2 or 3 lines that we've written in the past. So is there more that we can do via the council tax bill that goes into every household, and that's cost neutral? Because obviously there's not a big bag of money enabling us to improve awareness. We've got to do it around our existing resources. We've been working very closely, more closely than before, with NHS, and they're beginning to promote CAB and promote the team that I manage, the welfare support team, more in their literature as well. So I think it's about pulling together with our partners and raising awareness that way without incurring additional cost, because we don't have an advertising budget, for example.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Sheila, do you have any questions for Sandra?
I don't think I do, actually. No, I just hope everybody found that useful. Hopefully it was helpful for everybody.
Yeah, we did get another question through now, so we'll take that. I believe it's for you, Sheila. Do you and CAB offer wider support or referrals in terms of employability and upskilling to appropriate clients?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Do
you and CAB offer wider support or referrals in terms of employability and upskilling to appropriate clients?
Yes, so we have got ESF funding for that very thing. So that's for people furthest removed from the labour market, and that is to upskill them. We also work very closely with Job Centre in terms of the sessions they put on to upskill people. So we work with them very closely to say, this is what our clients are telling us, that they're really finding difficult and true barriers for them gaining employment. And we work closely with Job Centre to get a programme in place. I don't know, it could be, writing your CV, it could be presenting an interview, it could be computing skills, anything like that. So that's how we approach it in Highland. So if you don't have links with your Job Centre, I would suggest you do that. And our ESF programme is very successful as well, very useful. It's managed by our Economic and Regeneration Manager, who also manages our employability team.
Thank you very much. I think we're reaching the end of this webinar, and we'll keep it within the time limit we've set as well. So thank you very much, Sheila, for presenting. And I'll just change over to the information about Sandra's contact details. If you have any further questions, please feel free to use these contact details here. Sandra, do you have anything you want to say to round up? Or Sheila, do you have anything? Sandra first, maybe?
Just to say thank you so much to Sheila for sharing your experiences and learning with us today. Thanks to all the attendees for listening to us and joining in, and thank you so much, Christopher, for facilitating the webinar today. And just to encourage anyone, you've got our contact details there for myself and the rest of the project team to get in touch with us at any time, and also, you know, just to continue to engage with us in your own review and use of the framework, and any support, you know, going forward. And you know, we'll be in contact. Thank you.
And Sheila, do you have anything you want to say at the end, or?
I would just wish to wish everybody good luck. Any reviews that they have. But my contact details are available there as well. If anybody would wish to get in touch at all, I'm more than happy to speak with people offline.
Great, thank you very much. I will end the webinar for all, so thank you very much for attending this webinar today, and have a nice day. Hopefully it's sunny where you are as well. Thank you very much.